Hi, I'm Scott Tucker, President of Planet Technologies. Welcome to PlanetTV, our newest resource designed to help our clients and the technical community at large. You'll hear from and have the opportunity to engage with our solution experts who are arguably among the best in their fields. We're confident you'll learn something new that you'll find valuable. And we'd like to hear from you afterwards, so please send us your feedback at info@go-planet.com or use our Twitter page @PlanetTech. Enjoy today's episode, and we hope you'll tune in again.
Hello and welcome to Planet TV. This is our inaugural episode where we're going to be talking about cloud-enabled SharePoint. Is it the right move for you? So my name is Rob Garrett. I'm a Senior Architect at Planet Technologies, also a Microsoft Certified IT Pro and book author of SharePoint 2013 Administration. For those of you that signed up for our webcast, you can win this book, so good luck with that, and we'll be doing the raffle later. Throughout this presentation, you can email info@go-planet.com, and we'll do our best to answer all the questions throughout and towards the end of this presentation. So today in our agenda, we're going to ask ourselves, well, why the cloud? What does the cloud have? What does the cloud offer for you? We're going to specifically talk about Office 365 and SharePoint Online. We're going to touch a little bit on Windows Azure, which is a vast topic and hopefully something that we can talk about in future webcasts. Of course, there's the migration aspect, getting your data into the cloud. How does that work? We're hopefully going to talk a little bit about that and explore it some further on in this deck. I do have a demo which I'm going to show you, which is going to focus an on-prem SharePoint, which I have running in Windows Azure, as well as it connected to Office 365 and hybrid. So hopefully by the time you get through the end of this webcast, you can ask yourself, are you ready for the cloud? So, why the cloud? Well, Gartner said in 2016 is the year of the cloud. Businesses are waking up to the fact that the cloud is the place to go. Really what we're talking about here is trying to lessen in IT infrastructure on premises. It's expensive, it's costly. All those people that you currently have managing your IT infrastructure right now could be doing other things and working on development for your company and your business. Really what this is about is reducing overall operating costs so that your business can innovate and do much more things rather than manage the tools that Microsoft will now offer for you in the cloud. Anyone that is au fait with terms like RTO and RPO, recovery time objective and recovery point objective as part of their SLAs for disaster recovery, will tell you that they're very important. How easy is it to recover after a disaster? How long does it take? Where is your data and how far back does your data go? Growth and scalability is also something else that the cloud offers. It's all very well having an infrastructure that works for you today, but what happens if your company doubles in size? Will your infrastructure grow with it? What about scalability? The cloud provides that for you. So here, really what we're trying to address is the future-proofing of your information platforms, making sure that you can scale your business as we move into 2016 and beyond. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the pros and cons with the cloud in general. And I'm not just talking about Microsoft's cloud. This applies just as easily to Google, Amazon, and any other cloud service provider. So I'm going to address the elephant in the room to start with and talk about control. Whenever we mention the cloud, the first thing that happens is those that aren't familiar with what the cloud has to offer usually say to me, well, what about my data, control of the data? I'm not sure I'm ready to put it in the hands of Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, the big players out there. How important is that for you? And that closely ties with security, which is the second bullet on my cons list. Security is a big, big factor. If you have data that's critical to you, a lot of government agencies, for example, will say, well, no, we don't want to put our data in the cloud because we want to maintain it on premise where we know it's secure. Service integration. The cloud isn't just about SharePoint or Exchange or Link. Often, all these different systems connect to they connect to systems that are on-premise. Maybe you have a payroll system or accounting system that you need to connect SharePoint to. But that can't live in the cloud necessarily, or can it? What about service integration? How do you get that to work? Ever since SharePoint 2007 came out, Microsoft enabled the ability to publish public websites on SharePoint, which introduced a whole function of customization. You've seen it all, from customized web parts to large menus to all sorts of flashy graphics that appear on websites, all customized with inside SharePoint. Well, how does that work if you move to the cloud? Do your customizations go with it? Does the cloud support those customizations? Sovereignty. Anyone that's interested in the terms of service and has read the terms of service for many of these cloud providers, specifically Google, for example, will tell you that anywhere they have a point of presence in the world is where they can host your data. So that's important. Maybe you think your data is being hosted on servers that are on US soil, but they may not be. They may be somewhere else, because cloud services are global. So sovereignty is an important aspect. And of course, compliance. And the government are very big on compliance, ensuring that your data is secure, ensuring that your data has retention policy. This is why there's FedRAMP, which essentially, and FISMA compliance for the government. And we're talking about managing risk mitigation. What's your tolerance level? Can you handle a lot of risk, or can you not? Important cons. So with that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about the pros that come with moving to the cloud. Well, right there at the top, we've got people. So all those, as I mentioned before, all those people that are managing your infrastructure, which can be vast if you have a large business, can now be concentrating on business development. That means that the number of administrators you've got for SharePoint or Exchange can be reduced, and instead you can then repurpose those people to do development, making sure that your business grows and you're not dealing necessarily with just maintenance overhead. I have security on my list as a pro as well, because it is. I would ask anyone out there that is an expert on security, can you do security as good as Microsoft? I would hasten to bet the answer is probably no. Microsoft spent an inordinate amount of time, energy, and money ensuring that what they offer as part of Office 365 is secure. Ensuring that breach is avoided. We've all seen the news about Target and recently Home Depot getting hacked. Well, obviously when your data is in the cloud, cloud providers need to make sure that that doesn't happen to them. So they pay close attention to make sure that breach is something that they avoid. Now, upgrade is something that's really close to my heart. I've done several upgrades when it comes to SharePoint on premises, SharePoint 2007 to SharePoint 2010, and 2010 to 2013. And I have to say it's a painful experience. It's not something that's trivially easy. But moving to the cloud and SharePoint Online is going to make that problem a thing of the past, because Microsoft is in the business of ensuring business continuity. So if you're using SharePoint Online and your data is up and running in the cloud, then when they continue to move on to the next version, your stuff's just going to work. You're not going to have issues with customizations that just fail just because they've rolled out a new upgrade. In fact, many of you are probably unaware that Microsoft are constantly upgrading Office 365 and pushing out new features. We just see in the news and on webcasts like this features that are important, but they are continually pushing out minor updates. The cloud offers business agility, which is really important. A few years ago, when a startup company consisting of a few people in a garage wanted to start a business, and that involved hosting something online, they would have to procure equipment, they would have to ensure that they could then host that equipment online, and if it involved SharePoint, installing that, making sure the operating system was configured properly, it could take weeks. And businesses that are larger and need to stand up an infrastructure such as SharePoint Online or SharePoint on-premise, that can take a long time. Whereas Office 365 and SharePoint Online can be stood up in as little time as an afternoon. I know because I've done it. Reliability is an important aspect of the cloud too. There's no more babysitting of SharePoint. SharePoint just works. You have it out there in the cloud, and you can just rely upon the fact that the services will work for you. You don't have to wonder that like your search service just stops working all of a sudden and you've got an erroneous error in your event log on your Windows machine because something was misconfigured. Microsoft take care of all of that for you. And I've left it for last, but innovation is an important, very big important aspect of the cloud. Again, the ability to just concentrate on innovating your business, moving forward, not worrying about the tools and the infrastructure. So Office 365 and SharePoint specifically. Well, Office 365 is more than just SharePoint. Although this webcast is about SharePoint Online, Office 365 does offer Exchange in the cloud, as well as Link for communication, Office web apps, and of course, you can also download Office rich client applications to work with that in concert as well. But really what we're talking about here is SharePoint Online. So why SharePoint Online? Well, all right off the bat, it has all the benefits that we just spoke about with the cloud. So essentially, no more babysitting of SharePoint. That's a full-time job. I know here at Planet, we work for many different like corporate and federal organizations that continue to use SharePoint on-premises, and it's a full-time job. I mean, that's good for us, but it may not be good for your business. What about scalability and adoption? Well, we talked a little bit about that. SharePoint Online enables that. It's just there. The whole infrastructure of SharePoint 0365 is focused on Windows Azure. So Windows Azure is a scalable platform that we'll talk about shortly that ensures that like you've always got the computing power and the process to scale as your business grows. Collaboration and sharing with users. Well, if you have an on-premise SharePoint that's running neatly behind your firewall, and then all of a sudden the VP or the CEO comes to you and says, hey, we want to expose this to some of our partners or external users. We want to ensure that we can collaborate externally because we're not just a business that works internally. How do we do that? Well, typically that's going to involve punching holes in firewalls, setting up accounts. Do you grant them accounts in your AD, or do you rely upon third-party authentication providers? These are questions that have to be answered. Well, the good news is with SharePoint Online, this is simplified. You just invite external users. As long as it's enabled in your tenant, you can invite, at this point, as many external users as you like. Yammer integration. Yammer was introduced around the time that like Twitter was big, the early infancy of Twitter. Essentially what Yammer is a social networking and tweeting for a business organization entity. So what this means is, for example, Planet has its own Twitter feed. So everyone in the company that has a Planet email address is able to then collaborate just as they would through a public medium like Twitter or Facebook. Well, Microsoft very quickly saw that like Yammer was picking up a lot of speed and traction as businesses were adopting this. It just so happened that with the release of SharePoint on-premise 2013, it has news features and newsfeed capabilities, which closely align with what Yammer was already doing. So Microsoft purchased Yammer, and now as part of Office 365 and SharePoint Online, you can now integrate Yammer into your Office 365 offering and then offer it as part of your services with SharePoint Online. I talked a little bit about migration and upgrades and how the SharePoint Online minimizes that. Sure, there's the initial pain of moving data from your on-premises environment or third party if you're not using SharePoint on-premises to SharePoint Online. But once that's done, that headache goes away. From then on, you don't have to worry about doing additional migrations when Microsoft increase their version or upgrade their Office 365 SharePoint Online. Now, as a result of that, of course, Microsoft have instilled good development best practices and guidelines for how you do customizations in the cloud. SharePoint Online no longer allows you, does not allow you to just drop DLLs and things in the global assembly cache on their servers, like you maybe have been used to on-premises servers. This means that developers have to follow a strict guidelines, and as a result of that, Microsoft introduced the app model and app catalog, which I'll save for another PlanetTV episode, but essentially it means that developers have to follow strict guidelines and rules on how they can deploy to Office 365. The good news is that the same rules can apply for your on-premises, which means that you can any customizations you develop can be both for O365 and on-premise if you continue to use it. Now, of course, there are some trade-offs with using SharePoint Online, and I'd be amiss if I didn't mention any of them. First of all, it's not the same as on-premises. That may seem like an obvious statement, but to some, that's not always clear. They just see SharePoint running in the cloud as part of SharePoint Online in O365, and well, isn't it just SharePoint? It's the same thing, right? Well, no. As mentioned in the previous slides, some of the things that developers have to do to get their customizations working in O365 is different to that of what they would be able to do on-premise. The pricing is completely different, and that may be attractive to some. Your on-premises SharePoint uses client access licensing, CLAUs. That can get quite expensive as you have a number of users, whereas Office 365 and SharePoint Online uses a per-user licensing model. Is that attractive to you? It might be. Storage limitations are plan dependent. Whereas you're probably used to just adding more storage to your on-premises environment, another LUN or another hard drive into your server, that's a little harder to do with SharePoint Online. You have to contact Microsoft, either upgrade your plan, of which there's several, or contact them and ask for more storage. Now, that's not to say that the storage they provide isn't vast. It's a lot. And some of the limitations that they provide are very reasonable. Now, we're going to talk about hybrid a little bit later on in this webcast. But hybrid is a neat solution. It enables you to have both on-premises SharePoint as well as in-cloud SharePoint, and then marry the two of them. But I will have to say that it's not a trivial exercise to set up. It's getting there, but it's not yet turnkey. So if that's something you're considering for your business, consider the overhead in getting that to work. We also talked about development earlier and no full trust developed solutions. That can be a big deal for some organizations that have got some legacy customizations that they want to deploy to Office 365 and SharePoint Online. Some things may not work and they have to be retooled. And then, of course, there's the migration. Migration, unlike Exchange, where Microsoft provided you a nice tool to move your mailboxes to Exchange Online, migration to SharePoint Online is a little bit more involved and unfortunately requires the use of third-party tools. Fortunately, there's many of them, and we'll touch a little bit on that as well as we move through the slides. So I want to talk a little bit now about Windows Azure. Now, I mentioned that Office 365 leverages Windows Azure, and Windows Azure is a fabric. It's an infrastructure that essentially is about shifting the responsibility from on-premises, where you're responsible for the entire stack, through to SharePoint Online and Office 365, where you're responsible for less. So over here on the left, we have our stack, which consists of everything from networking through storage, through the operating system, middleware, the data, and your applications. You're responsible for all of it, and that can be a huge headache to maintain. And unfortunately, if any one of those boxes at the lower end fail, then everything in the stack above it fails. If your storage fails, then SharePoint's offline. It's as simple as that. Now, of course, there's redundancy and there's ways to mitigate risk, and that's what we're all used to as far as high availability. But still, you're responsible for all of that. Then we shift over to our next block, which is infrastructure as a service. So at the very least, if you're using Windows Azure, Microsoft can manage the networking, storage, servers, and virtualization for you. In fact, as part of my demo, my SharePoint on-prem is actually running in Windows Azure, and I can show you that. That means that you can continue to maintain the operating system middleware and your runtime and configure servers as you always have. So really what we're doing here is that we're playing with the flexibility versus complexity rule here, so that you have still a lot of flexibility as far as what you do with your servers, but you don't have to worry about procuring hardware or maintaining that network or storage infrastructure that's underneath of it. Then we move over to platform as a service, which is really where Windows Azure shines, and it's where Microsoft see things going. So they go one step further and say, well, look, Microsoft can not only manage everything that we managed as part of IaaS, but we can also manage your runtime, middleware, and OS as well. As an example, if you use Windows Azure SQL Server reporting services, that's a service that Windows Azure provides. You don't have to worry about the fact that you've got to configure a server to host it or maintain SQL Server. It's just a service that's there for you to use, which means as an end business, as a consumer, then all you have to worry about is your application and data. Again, see, we're getting towards this innovation, concentrating on your business, your data, your development. And lastly, we have software as a service. And this is really where Office 365 and Windows Intune come into play. Whereas now, really, what we're talking about is a rich application that is hosted in the cloud. Everything about Office 365 is exactly that, managing and just playing with the application. You don't have to worry about the service configuration that goes underneath any of it. Even your data is looked after by Microsoft themselves. So why Azure? Well, versus Office 365, that is. Azure is kind of like a middle ground in a way. If you're not yet ready to let go of the fact that you want to maintain your own servers, Windows Azure may be something that's good for you as an infrastructure as a service offering. It essentially still reduces your infrastructure responsibility. You don't have to worry about what virtual servers are running, whether they're running out of space, whether they're maintaining enough CPU. And you can tailor all of that as part of your Windows Azure tenant and configuration. As long as you continue to pay for the service, you can scale your infrastructure to meet the demands of the business. Windows Azure provides a complete a la carte set of services that you can purchase, and they're vast. And I could probably spend the next hour going through all of them. But safe to be said that Windows Azure is going to be big as we move into 2015 and 2016 and beyond. Service integrity was always a big thing for me. Services are guaranteed to work. When you're talking about doing SharePoint on-premises and one of your services fails, it can be a real pain. I've spent hours trying to get search to work when something's failed, and it ultimately turns out that there's a service account that's expired a password, or there's been a change to Active Directory group policy, and that can affect my entire SharePoint on-premises infrastructure. I don't have to worry about that with Windows Azure so much. Everything just works. They provide services, those services work, and they guarantee them. Now, interestingly enough, Microsoft is not just about providing Microsoft services. If you wish to use Windows Azure to host your Linux or your Oracle service or even WordPress blog, Windows Azure will allow you to do that, which is good because Microsoft want to promote you using their cloud. They don't want to lock you in necessarily to a Microsoft technology, even though we know that what they provide is really good. So really what we're talking about here is centralized intelligence. Essentially, what Microsoft is trying to do with Windows Azure is to provide the go-to platform, the go-to fabric, where you can host your services at a service cost and maintain your infrastructure in the cloud, reliability and low maintenance. So I'm going to talk a little bit about SharePoint as regards to Windows Azure. So it's similar to on-premises without the hardware overhead. So in my demo, I've installed one SharePoint server, a SQL server, and an ADFS server, which I'll show you shortly. But essentially, I just stood up a Windows Azure tenant, I stood up a VM, Microsoft looks after the network that goes with that, the storage that I need, and as far as I'm concerned, I can RDP in remote desktop to my services, my servers, and I can manage SharePoint. This effectively is similar to what one is used to when we play with on-premises SharePoint, only now I don't have to worry too much about the infrastructure that's underneath of that. So this is kind of like an interesting halfway between moving from on-premises truly to that of in the cloud. I can rely upon the fact that I can choose any one of the Microsoft global located Microsoft data centers. Now I happen to have all of mine hosted in the East US because I chose it that way. That's where I want my data located. But if I was from Europe, I could pick the closest Microsoft data center that's hosted in Europe, and I could host all my data there and my services there. Obviously, I want to make sure that my SharePoint environment is optimal for the audience that I'm looking to access it. So if my corporation is not in the East US, maybe it's on the Pacific coast, and I can use the data center that's there. We talked a little bit about the fact that Azure is scalable and is a scalable infrastructure fabric. And of course, that means that then I don't have to worry that if I need to boost the performance of my servers that are running SharePoint, I can do that very easily. It's not a problem. Earlier on in the slide deck, I mentioned data service sovereignty, and that with Google, for example, anywhere they have a point of service is where your data can reside. Well, Microsoft have thought about that. They understand that if your business is running in the US and you want to keep your data in the US, then this ensures that you can choose that data center. You can dedicate which data center your data services reside. And that's important, especially when we start getting towards government cloud and gov cloud, which is something that Microsoft is pushing for Windows Azure. And of course, integration with other offerings in Azure as well. All those services, mobile-ready services, rights management that are going to be produced via Windows Azure, all at your disposal. So again, we're reducing the operating cost, paying for what you use, tailoring your business, tailoring the services to meet the needs of your business. Now I'm quickly going to talk about migration. Again, this is a large topic that we could spend the next hour on, so I'm just going to gloss over this briefly. But when you're migrating to the cloud, it's important that you make sure you have a good roadmap. What are you moving? Are you moving all of your SharePoint on-premises data to that of the cloud? Or are you moving part of it? Are you going to be reorganizing it when you move it into SharePoint Online? These are questions that you need to get answered from your business. So definitely involve the owners of your content. Part of that is involving and identifying priority. What is most important? What is key data? What is going to stay on-premise? What is going to go in the cloud? What data is being used every day versus what data is maybe stale and can either be retired or remain on-premises? Identify a timeline for your migration. Ensure that you know when this is all going to occur. The switchover has to be timely so that you don't have loss of business. Going back to that RTO premise again. Consider a gradual move to hybrid. This is big news at the moment. Recently with the SharePoint conference that was in Las Vegas in 2014, this year, hybrid was the theme. Microsoft's really pushing the hybrid technologies so that you don't have to go wholesale into the cloud. We understand that businesses still have services that they're tied to that are running on premises, and they can't just switch those off and move everything to the cloud tomorrow. So providing a hybrid enables your business to take advantage of both worlds, at least until you've completed your migration later. And of course, then there's the use of the third-party tools that make the actual migration of your data a reality, of which there's several. So I've named just a few here, from Dell, ShareGate, MetaLogix, MetaViz. All of these tools are great tools that I've had experience in using, and you can reach out to the various vendors to help you with that and the migration. But of course, I wouldn't be me if I didn't say that Planet Technologies is your partner. We're very experienced in doing migrations to SharePoint Online, so don't hesitate to call me or anyone here at the Planet shop if you're interested in getting help with your migration to the cloud. So with that, I'm going to quickly show you my demo. I think we're still good with time, so I want to quickly show you what I've got, which is a hybrid scenario. Now, I mentioned that I've got my infrastructure running in Windows Azure. This is primarily just because it's there, it's readily available, versus standing up SharePoint on a server at home, which isn't reliable. So what we have is an ADFS server, which we're using to manage my authentication. This in itself talks to my Active Directory service, and that of course integrates with SharePoint and my SQL Server that are running and hosting my data. We have Office 365 communicating with my ADFS server, and there is a gray box there which is my reverse proxy, which I'll talk a little bit about, which you need to set up if you're going to offer inbound hybrid search or inbound business connectivity. All right. Okay, so what we're looking at now is my SharePoint Office 365 SharePoint Online tenant that you get when you stand up a brand new tenant in SharePoint Online. The familiar admin and OneDrive and sites links at the top, and of course O365, so we know we're in the cloud. And I'm going to do a quick search. Oops. Let me just go back here. All right. All right, let's try that again. All right, while it's doing that, let me just fire over to my SharePoint on-premises, also aka in Azure. What we have running here is something similar. This is the standard SharePoint 2013. And this one also has search running. So let's search for something here. All right, so here we see various different search results. And of course, we can hover over those and we can get some context here. But what I want to show you is I want to show you some results that have actually appear both for on-premise as well as on the cloud when I'm searching for my on-premise environment. So I'm going to go back to this search result here. I'm going to go back to my, here we go. And this time I'm going to change my search to search for everything. All right. So here I'm going to say, let's just search for my name, which is going to bring up results of any documents I've uploaded or anything that's working as far as what I've installed on premises as well as in the cloud. And right here, what we see is down here is our typical results that we're used to as far as what we're seeing on premises. But at the top, we also see SharePoint Online results for Garrett. And this is data that is coming directly from the cloud. So this is hybrid in its best. And we've also got, we can also shoot out to my site here with a link with my nice picture there. And there it is. And of course, I've got 2 users in my SharePoint Online tenant. So we're also seeing the fact that my tenant admin, who is me, also is there and is appearing in search results. Now, what I'd like to be able to show you over here, and here is our Office SharePoint Online Office 365 search results when I just did a quick search here, and I can also search for me in here. Now, what I wanted to show you is the ability to do the inbound. Now, if inbound was configured through a reverse proxy, you would see on-premises results showing in the search results of SharePoint Online. Now, unfortunately, I haven't got my reverse proxy set up and running properly, which is why you're still only seeing SharePoint Online results. But that may be desirable. Effectively, what we've got here is outbound only search. That means that when you're on site, you can see both, but when you're out there in the cloud, you can only see what's in the cloud. And that might be desirable for your business. Now, I know we're coming to the close, so I want to quickly show you the authentication. Now, I wanted to show you the search running first because my authentication can be sometimes temperamental. So I'm going to open up a private browsing so that all my cookies and cache is gone. And I want to show you the experience of single sign-on that you get when you've set it up using ADFS and single sign-on through SharePoint Online. So I'm going to go to my SharePoint Online URL, and this is the experience that you would get if you was logging in outside your company organization and you're at home, say. So I get asked, well, okay, you need to provide a login. So I'm going to provide my login. Now, immediately, what's going to happen here is that the SharePoint or Office 365 has identified that my domain, robgarrett365.com, is a federated domain, which means that it's not being looked after by Microsoft themselves. It's actually being looked after by me as part of my on-premise ADFS and Active Directory infrastructure. So now what's happened is we've been redirected over to my Windows Azure ADFS server. And here, I can log in using the credentials that are stored in my business Active Directory. And all being well, with the password typed in properly, it's federated and it's put me back into my Office 365 SharePoint Online tenant. And here we are. And it shows me in the corner as my federated user. Now, opening another tab now to my demo site, which is remember, my on-premises site. If I click this, with the magic of single sign-on, I'm now automatically logged in. And of course, it shows my username in the corner as rob@robgarrett365.com. So that's single sign-on at best. That's typically something that as a business that I would definitely recommend you do. That gives you full power to maintain your users as you've always done in Active Directory and looking after your infrastructure. There are other options available to you, including using directory sync and password sync so that you can keep your credentials in the cloud and keep them separate. But single sign-on is definitely something I'd recommend if you're going this route. All right. So, in closing, got a few slides here just before we finish up. So the question is, are you ready for the cloud? Well, to answer that, I'm going to just put to you 3 different scenarios that we've discussed. Scenario 1, which is fully SharePoint Online, moving everything into the cloud. Maybe you have on-premises already and you're trying to migrate. Maybe you're just starting from afresh and you want to stand up SharePoint Online in the cloud with Microsoft, and great, then you don't have to worry about Microsoft, and then you can go fully cloud. Scenario 2, maybe you're not quite ready for Office 365 and SharePoint Online. Maybe you understand, though, that there's some benefit to using Windows Azure, and Windows Azure is going to be the place that you store SharePoint. And then, of course, there's scenario 3, which is hybrid, where you can have SharePoint in all of these environments. You continue to have SharePoint in Windows Azure. You can have it running in Office 365, as well as on your on-premise data center. And you can set up hybrid to interconnect with all of them. So with that, I'm going to leave the remaining time for any questions. I know that some questions will be coming in at our address, info@go-planet.com. So please feel free to send a few over. And we're monitoring that address right now. And I'm just going to switch over to my link so that I can see those questions coming in. All right. All right, so questions. Anything out there? Any questions? How many of you using O365? Is it something that is something that the viewers of this audience are using already, considering using? No questions yet, huh? Here's a question. So someone's asked, oh, another question's popped up. Here we go. So you mentioned connected to line of business systems on-premise with SharePoint Online. How does that work? Oh, that's a great question. So both SharePoint Online and Office 365 use something called business connectivity services. And business connectivity services, is historically been responsible for connecting up line of business systems with SharePoint. Well, that offering is available to you as part of SharePoint Online and in the cloud. And in fact, our very own Fabian Williams, who works for Planet Technologies, is very experienced in doing exactly that, setting up business connectivity services from SharePoint Online to on-premises line of business systems. And I'd be happy to put you in touch with him or talk to you myself later offline about how BCS can serve that purpose. All right, next question. How many certificates do I need for hybrid, and can I use self-signed certificates? Well, that's a great question, and it really depends on what hybrid scenario you're planning to use. Are you planning to do inbound versus outbound? Either way, with hybrid, you definitely need to set up a trusted certificate that both on-premises and online both support using server-to-server trust. And typically what Microsoft recommends for that is a self-signed cert, because the only services that need to know about that certificate are SharePoint Online themselves and of course your on-premise infrastructure as part of your security token service. Now, if you are trying to expose your on-premise to the outside world for hybrid search as inbound, then you're going to need to purchase a real certificate that is backed by VeriSign or one of the leading authorities for certificates, and you're going to need to set that up through your proxy, your web application proxy or threat management gateway. So a proper certificate for that. All right, so 2 very good questions. All right. Any other questions? I think at this point we are at our time mark. So I'll say this. Thank you for everyone that's joined this webcast and listened to me for a short 30 to 40 minutes today. I will say this. If you do have questions and follow-up after the webcast, please feel free to continue to send them to info@go-planet.com, and I will make sure that those questions get answered. And if it's not in my level of expertise to answer that question, someone here at Planet will definitely be able to answer them for you. Good news, we do have a winner for the book. Sherry Weekly, congratulations. I'll make sure that I sign a copy of this book and we'll get this right off to you. Congratulations. Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be part of this inaugural episode of Planet TV. Please tune in later to see future episodes, and thanks to everyone that helped make this a reality.